On this week's episode, we're going to continue in our prophetic history series and talk about the angel of his presence, how it has to do with the Joshua generation, and hear a remarkable testimony from our guest in Spain, as well as a troubling vision she had about the coming persecution. A powerful episode right here on Till Zion Sings.
Welcome to Till Zion Sings, a show where we proclaim the next wave of God's glory coming to the earth and connect with God's heart for Israel. This is a place where you'll find encouragement and strengthening and hear what the Spirit of God is saying to the nations and to you. From the northeast of Scotland, here is your host, Frank Sway.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Till Zion Sings. Now, in the last episode, I talked about the prophetic story related to snow and Paul Cain and the Joshua generation, and how the Lord is going to raise up a Joshua generation walking in purity, that's purified by the Lord, that's been made white as snow. And I also said that we're going to begin a series on the prophetic history of some of the things that the Lord's been speaking since 2019 concerning this Joshua generation. And we started this last week. So if you missed last week's episode, I want to encourage you to catch up, go back and listen or watch last week's episode. And you're going to understand this week's episode a lot better. But in the last episode, we talked about the significance of Paul Cain's death on the 12th of February, which is actually tomorrow. We're recording this on Friday, the 11th of February. Tomorrow, the 12th of February, this Shabbat, is the anniversary of Paul Cain's death. So many things the Lord's been speaking in these last 3 years. What the Lord is doing, some of the prophetic things the Lord's been speaking had to do with Paul Cain's death. One of the most significant things, now I know Paul Cain is known for his stadium revival vision. He had this vision of stadiums all across America, all across the world. There will be worship teams ministering 3 days and 3 nights without food, without water, without change of clothing, but they're sustained by the glory of the Lord. And then when the 3 days and 3 nights are over, they would switch. Another team would come on stage and take over from there. This 24/7 stadium Christianity that he prophesied. That's one of the most significant visions that Paul Cain had. But the revelation that really impacted me personally, that's been something that the Lord's been using to speak about, was this angel of his presence. Now, in 1987, Mike Bickle asked Paul Cain, how long do you think you're going to live? Paul Cain says, well, I don't know exactly when, but I see myself in 30 years, in 2017, in England, ministering in an Elim context. Elim is the second largest Pentecostal denomination in the UK. He said, I'm going to be ministering in that context, and I'm going to be lighting a match to ignite the next move of God's Spirit in this generation. Fast forward 30 years later, 2017, Ken and Lois God, who didn't know about this word from Paul, invited Paul over to minister in England. And Paul Cain didn't know that Ken and Lois God were associated with Elim either. So they had this conference, and I was in that meeting, and many of you listening and watching were probably in that gathering as well. I just remember Paul Cain just walking onto the stage, and this whole atmosphere shifted. And he said, there is an unprecedented move of God coming to this nation with unprecedented unity, unprecedented outpouring of the Spirit, unprecedented glory. And he says, I'm here to light a match. And he says, in this move of God, the angel of his presence will be with you. It will be characterized by the angel of his presence. So for a whole year, I asked the Lord, what is this angel of his presence? What is it? I don't claim to have an exclusive interpretation of this word, but what the Lord has shown me regarding this is Isaiah 63, verse 9, which says in Hebrew, "Bechol tzaratam lo tzar u'malach panav Hoshiam." In all their afflictions, he was afflicted, and the angel of his presence delivered them. And I looked over to the Hebrew, malach panav, angel of his presence, and it says the angel of his face. And then the spirit of revelation came on me saying, there's something about the face of God that when it turns to a generation, it brings deliverance. And the Spirit of God said to me, the face of God is about to turn to a generation to bring deliverance to this generation. And this tied in with Paul Cain's death, signifying the death of the Moses generation and the beginning of a Joshua generation. So I went on this 21-day fast with a friend in Israel. And during this 21-day fast, the Lord spoke so much. There was so much birthing and travailing for this Joshua generation. And he spoke so clearly that there is a Joshua generation coming that's going to carry this manifestation of the angel of his presence and to bring deliverance. So I want to bring a guest on who has been part of this prophetic history since 2019 to tell her story. My friend Guiomar Pires from Spain, whom I believe is one of the emerging leaders in this new generation in Europe. And there's a significance to Europe, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But Guiomar Pires is a house of prayer leader from Salamanca in Spain, whom the Lord has used in a mighty way to mobilize prayer all over Europe. So without further ado, let's bring on Guiomar.
Hello, Fran.
How are you, Guiomar?
Good. It's very great to be here from Spain, and look what I have. Till Science
Yes.
Sing.
Wow, you have the Till Zion Sings mug. I wonder how you managed to get it. I just don't.
I don't know. I don't know. Someone sent it to me
Someone sent it to you
on my birthday, so it was
on your
great to
birthday. Oh, wow.
yes, that was
Wow, that is
powerful
so
to receive
thoughtful
it.
of them.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes, it was me. I was,
exactly.
you know what? I think you just knew. I think, I was trying to make it as subtle as possible. So I said, remember how I did that? I said, hey, Gil, can you give me your address?
I
Very
didn't
subtle.
know. I didn't know. But it was great because I received it just on my birthday, the day
Yeah,
before.
the day before your
The day
birthday.
before.
That was,
But it was it was
yes,
it was really cool.
yeah. Anyway, talking about the prophetic history, I mean, I have on my notes two pieces of paper. I'm just like this thing connected to that, connected to that. But I wanted to, like I said, you are part of this prophetic history. Some of the things the Lord has been speaking about this Joshua generation. I believe you are one of the key emerging leaders in this Joshua generation, and you have a heart for prayer, worship, ministering to the Lord, which is really significant for this week as well, because the Torah portion we're going to be discussing later on is about ministering to the Lord. It's about the priestly garment. So, but we're going to get to that later. But first of all, just tell us your story. How did the Lord encounter you and bring you to this house of prayer, encountering God in intimacy? Just tell us about that.
Well, we had to go back many years ago.
Mm,
I was 17 years old. I was in a time of really seeking God, but not knowing who I am, not knowing
yeah.
what is my purpose. So I was quite depressed. And also, I was in a
Mm,
relationship that was really painful.
mm,
So, you need to know that I was coming also from a context that it was very conservative Christian. So I didn't know much about Holy Spirit.
mm,
And so I received an invitation from a group of people to go to the north of Spain. There was a
mm,
conference with people from different denominations. So I just say, okay, I need God. So I'm going.
yeah.
And I remember they were talking about this prayer room. I never
Mm,
heard about prayer room. And it was organized for 24/7 prayer.
mm,
Um, So I went there and I see that was really nice place. You can sit down on the floor. You have to
Yeah.
suit. You have, crayons to write down. But something that really impacted me on that place, it was the peace. It was a
Mm.
peace that I never sensed before in any place. And I just sit down and I knew my life, it was going to another opposite.
Yeah.
I being there is like
Mm.
God just was speaking to my heart things that I need to change.
Yeah.
And I heard the voice of God for the first time in my life, and He said, "You need to follow me. Do you want to follow me?"
Mm.
And I say, "Yes, I want to follow you." I knew my life, it was full of depression and
Mm.
sadness,
Mm.
and I was broken. I was really broken. And once I say yes to Him, I just received this peace, this overwhelming
Wow.
peace. And His voice is so gentle, is so beautiful. So
Yeah.
I say yes to Him, but then I was through a process of healing emotions and many things.
Mm.
And there was one time that I need to forgive someone that was really, he did a lot to me. So I was just asking God, please help me to carry his pain. Help me to find why he did that to me. And suddenly I just felt something inside of my heart that was very
Mm.
painful. I started crying, not knowing what was happening. But then I had the first vision, and I see Jesus of the cross saying to me, I forgive you, and you forgive that person, and I forgive you.
Mm.
And
Mm.
suddenly I just felt like someone was touching my heart and healing my heart. And I feel again this overwhelming peace. And suddenly I start to speak in tongues. I never been in a Pentecostal church,
Wow.
charismatic church, just me and Jesus in the room. And it was
Mm.
so powerful. I feel fire. I feel just the power of God over me. And
Wow.
from that moment, I just spent hours and hours and hours praying, seeking God, reading the word. You need to understand that I wasn't in a church not because I didn't want to go to church, but because in my town there was no church. I didn't have Christians friends, and sometimes my family don't support me as well. So it's just me looking for the fire. It's just
Mm.
me seeking God, spending
Mm.
hours and hours and hours.
Mm.
And I start to see what God sees on me, because I didn't
Mm.
I thought I was nothing. I thought that God cannot use me. I always put other people higher than me. So
Mm.
when God was just showing me these things, then I see how he used me. And there was
Mm.
this time that as I told you, I was in the high school. A guy from my class, he was bringing marijuana, and I
Mm.
knew he didn't believe in God. So
Right.
he just told me, "Well, I brought this. God create everything, so this is good." And I say, no, you are using God for your convenience. So when I
Yeah.
said that, nobody knew that I believe in God. So everyone on my class looked at me like, wow. I didn't know that was a divine appointment. But all of a sudden, I just forget about myself and I start to speak the truth. I start to just declaring who Jesus is, what he did in my life, how he heals me, my testimony. It was like 15, 20 minutes. And
Wow.
some people in the beginning were laughing at me. Some of them left, but others, like I would say 10 people, were looking at me like amazed, like how this
Mm.
girl is talking with this authority. And even my
Mm.
teacher was asking me questions about God, things that she was having in her heart but never speak out to others.
Mm.
So it was so powerful. God just gave me, the to be brave in my class. And I
Mm.
remember the next days, people coming to me and say, I want to know more about that Jesus. Would you give your life
Wow.
for Jesus? And that was one question that was like, wow, this person asked me, will you die for Jesus? That was
Wow.
like, wow. You say, that was very deep. And especially when
Wow.
we are talking in Spain, people are very, they're not open,
Mm,
they just are very religious, and in young people don't believe in God. They do traditions, but they don't
mm,
believe in God. For
mm.
me to do it in a town that is very Catholic, it was powerful. So I would say that this is an example of what God wants to do in this generation. So 1 year after, I started college in another city in Salamanca, and I went
Mm,
back to my old town just to find some papers from the high school. And I
mm,
just take the opportunity to talk to my teacher. And when she showed me, she was like crying, and I didn't understand why she crying. And she
mm.
said, Gio, I need to tell you something. I say, okay, what happened? Say, when you talk about God, it really impressed me. And there
Wow.
was different things on my life that, challenged me to seek God. And you
Mm,
were part of it. So now I
wow.
found Jesus. And for
Wow.
me, and she even told me that she wanted to get baptized and everything. And for me, it was like, wow, God, you did it. You did it.
Mm,
Praise you for what you have done. So for me, it was like, thank you, God, because even the painful times, the things, times that I didn't see you, it was worth it because of your pursuing of your presence, seeking you, speaking tongues in this season
mm,
without knowing what was happening. It was powerful time just to see a generation change. My teacher, people that listen to me, it's just so powerful how God can use you when you feel the weakest and you feel like you are nothing. God can use everyone in this
mm,
generation to bring his
mm,
presence, not only in a church, but in the high school, in a
yeah.
class,
Mm,
in the street. God can use every single person. I want to encourage every single person that is listening. Just pray to God to use you today. He's going to use
mm,
you. He's going to use your mouth. He's going to use your hands to heal people. Just be humble
mm.
and find him.
Yes, that's powerful. See, the reason I wanted you to share your testimony, that testimony, is because it's so powerful because it speaks of what the Lord wants to do for a whole generation. He
Amen.
wants to draw a whole generation to his presence because the prophetic history is that the angel of his presence will be with this generation. The face of God will turn to this generation and bring deliverance. So it's about
Amen.
this being face to face with God and cultivating this intimacy, which is exactly your story. You encountered the Lord in the prayer room, and then you cultivated this intimacy with God and just being face to face, dialoguing with Him. And then the Lord used you to bring deliverance to your
Mm.
school. So I believe you are actually a prototype, one of the prototypes, a small prototype of what the Lord wants to use a whole generation of of European believers, because you represent Europe, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that the Lord highlighted in those 21 days is that throughout Israel's history, there's this figure called the angel of his presence, the face of God, which is really Jesus, that brought deliverance to a whole nation. And the Aaronic blessing says, the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and bring you peace. And I find it interesting that during the pandemic, the blessing
Mm.
was sung the most.
Yeah.
One of the things that Lord spoke about, he spoke about the timing of this generation beginning to rise. He says, watch out for two signs. The first one is a global Passover. When the
Mm.
pandemic came, literally all of Israel, for the first time since Exodus, all of Israel had to stay home. Literally, it was a global Passover. But the second sign the Lord spoke about was the breaking of the dam at the Sea of Galilee, which I didn't know there was a dam. Our friend David confirmed that there was indeed a dam there. And the water level in 2020 was so high that it was almost overflowing, whereas the Sea of Galilee was dry, had been so dry for decades that the dam had not let any water out at all. And the breaking of the dam was to symbolize the water breaking in the birthing of a move of God. And we know that whatever happens in Israel is a prophetic picture of what he's going to do in the nations. So the dam was about to break. Actually, they started letting some water out. So the water has started to break already. We're still waiting for that dam to break. We're still watching out for that. But the water has started to break. Meanwhile, the nation of the earth were going through this travail. But what's on the other side of this is an unprecedented global outpouring of the Spirit. All of this is prophetic. It speaks of a Joshua generation rising. So, and I wanted to ask you. So, you had a vision about persecution that's coming and how we are supposed to prepare for persecution. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. So the first time it was in the beginning of 2020. I watched this documental of sheep among wolves.
Sheep
Wolves.
among wolves. Yeah.
Yeah, and in that moment, I just was crying, and but I hear the voice of God to prepare myself for the persecution that it will come. And there was a very strong conviction that I didn't have before. Even I was, after watching this, I was talking to a few people and telling we need to be ready because persecution is coming. And then during the pandemic, I have different dreams. And in this, the first dream that I have, I was in a city of Europe, and there was a lot of restrictions because of the COVID. And they were just, even if you were talking to someone, a police will come and see if you are maintaining the distance, and they're checking everything. They go home to home to check out everything. And I remember I went to a place of worship, and there was worshiping there. And suddenly I hear someone coming behind me, and they were having these, ¿cómo se dice?
The shields.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were, and I was like, oh my goodness. Because they were worshiping, and they came to just to trying to kill people who were worshiping in that room. So I was like, wow, this is intense. That was before the pandemic. And in this dream, I see how politics and different groups of politics were just trying to destroy like Christians. And in this part, I see myself praying with different pastors on my city, because I was coordinating the meetings for the pastors, so we were right in the center of the city, and we see thousands of people coming like bulls to us and against us. But we were praying, and suddenly when we were praying, God just protect us, and He put these different police, putting this, I don't know how to say in English, but
Yeah.
yeah, they were just protecting us. So I see the the God protecting us. Yeah, and then I have another dream. Well, I was with a group of people. I was leading a worship time and praying, and we were in a flat, and the floor started, like moving and things. We hear thousands of people on downstairs and also in the street, and they were just coming, and they put their LGTBI flag over the building, just trying to tell us we are here, we are here. And they were like trying to destroy also. So after having all these visions and dreams, I just found out that God wants to use this generation to do something big, but we have to be ready for persecution, because a lot of things are happening in the last 3 years, and things are getting so quickly.
Do you know, it was so powerful. I remember you calling me. I think it was like 11 o'clock at night or something. You just say, Frank, the Lord spoke to me about persecution. I'm like, wow, that's intense. When you shared that, I remember when you first shared that, I was like, the presence of God was touching me. And I really feel like this is a word of the Lord, but it actually ties in. The reason I wanted you to share this is that it ties in with another thing that the Lord highlighted in 2019 in those 21-day fast. This other vision that Paul Cain had, the threefold revelation that he had in 1988, where he had a threefold vision where he saw George Bush and Dan Quayle getting elected. And then he saw the fall of communism. So the two parts both came to pass within like a few months, within a year. But then the first two parts were actually to build faith for the third part, which is the residue of communism will mix with Islam, and then an
Wow.
evil empire will rise out of Europe.
Wow.
That's going to be horrendously evil. That's going to touch the nations. It's not. It's gonna have a strong base in Europe, but it's going to be bigger than Europe. But the nations would tremble under its terror. But at the same time, the Lord is going to raise up a victorious church, a victorious ecclesia out of Europe to fulfill this statement: Europe shall be saved.
Mm.
And that is so significant. The Lord just like spoke so strongly about that, and he connected that with Brexit, because I believe God was setting Britain apart in a very special way through Brexit, so that the Lord can do something to touch Europe, to fuel this European church. I really believe this is connected to the angel of his presence bringing deliverance. Is connected to a Joshua generation seeking the face of God. You know how Joshua, the ministry of Joshua didn't begin with the conquest, it began with a prayer room. Because when Moses dialogued with God face to face, Joshua, the son of Nun, stayed in the tent. He would not leave. So I believe this is the word of the Lord. He is raising up this Joshua generation from a place of intimacy, encountering the Lord face to face and bringing deliverance. And in the midst of this horrendously evil empire, in the midst of persecution, a glorious, victorious European church will rise out of it. Now, I believe several European nations are going to be part of an alliance, which we're going to talk about in future episodes. But thank you, Guiomar, for coming on the show this week.
Thank you, Frank. See you next time.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to do another Torah rewind for this week's Torah portion, which is Tetzaveh from Exodus 27, verse 20 to 30, 10, with our last year's guest, Shoshanna. So we'll be back.
We'll be right back to Till Zion Sings.
Hey there, friends, it's Yoni from Israel. Thank you for being a loyal supporter, a prayer warrior, and for supporting us in our work in Israel. There are three big things that God did this January. The first thing is we saw a believer come to faith, a new believer. He grew up in a Catholic background. He was an Arab, our waiter. We spoke with him for 10 minutes at the restaurant, brought him over to our home, spoke with him for an hour and a half, meeting a good friend, and after an hour and a half speaking about sin, and we just spoke about the gospel, the good news and the bad news together. He gave his life to Yeshua after an hour and a half of not accepting that God even exists, or that there is a thing called sin. So guys, God is working. He's working in people's hearts, and says in Romans chapter 1, verse 16, that the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. So we want to preach the gospel, the good news that changes people's lives. The second thing is, I don't know if you know, but we started up a team in Tel Aviv. Once or twice a week, we try to go out in Tel Aviv with the youth, with the young men, and we're building up an evangelism team full-time in Tel Aviv. And as we also have a vision for all of Israel to have evangelism teams in each and every Messianic fellowship. And guys, at first we were very, very afraid. We were afraid to share our faith, but we've seen God move like never before. And now the youth, the young men that are with us, are encouraged. They're bold for their faith. They're sharing their faith boldly in Israel. We're seeing God bring great conversations. And the third big thing that God's been doing is He's been connecting us to other big ministry organizations that are doing evangelism in Israel. There aren't many, but there are a few, and we've been partnering with them. I can't give their names for the security reasons, but God is working. Be praying for Israel and share Israel Revival Ministries with your friends, because we need your prayer and support in order to advance the gospel in the land of Israel. Bye-bye.
We now return to Till Zion Sings.
Well, this week, I'm actually really, really excited about the portion Tetzaveh, which is about the priestly ministry, really. The Lord commands Moses to charge the sons of Israel to minister to the Lord. And we want to discuss what it means to minister unto the Lord. So with me to discuss this week's portion, and, well, it is my friend Susanna, Shoshanna. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. I love that little preparation. It's so good. I'm really excited what will turn out of this episode.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was a long introduction. But Shoshanna, you were with us a few episodes ago. You are passionate about the nations who speak so many languages, but is connected to Israel, right?
Yeah, I love Israel. Like,
It's
I
so good.
love Israel. I
Yeah.
love, like, as we talk
Mm.
about ministering unto the Lord as well, I love being in prayer houses in Israel and like
Yes.
ministering unto the Lord from
Mm.
Israel, wherever it might be,
Yes.
maybe on the Mount of Olives, maybe in the desert with you guys, you know, like wherever
Uh-huh.
it might be. Just like
Totally.
ministering unto the Lord in the Holy Land is so special and such a
Yes, so
privilege.
good. That was actually going to be my next question because you spent a lot of time on the Mount of Olives or in other houses of prayer. So, what do you love about the houses of prayer in Israel specifically, or just in general, being in His presence?
Well, in general, I love each house of prayer. Like, I've been to several house of prayer in different nations, and I think why I love them so much is because he's so worthy to be adored, and like he's so worthy of 24/7 worship. And I just love to be there because it's a place where we really give him like attentively our attention. Like, we choose to go in there into a prayer room and give him all of our attention, and that's what he's worthy of. And I mean,
Yes.
like, as Israel is such a special place, I think like he deserves more than anything. He deserves to be worshipped from his people and from his country. And yeah, and I also love like how in Israel they're interceding so much for the nations, and it's so powerful. Like, people from different nations come to Israel into the prayer house and interceding for other nations on behalf of other nations. And I think it's so powerful. Like, there's so much more power in intercession and ministering unto the Lord than I think we tend to underestimate it.
Absolutely. Now, in these last few portions, we've been talking about the tent of meeting or the tabernacle, or in Hebrew, Mishkan, or the tent of meeting, or Ohel HaMoed, like the place, the tent of encounter, of the appointment, right? So the Lord has an appointment in that tent with his people. It's like the place where God meets with man. Now, Susanna, we met in a tent of meeting, right, in the Negev. So I remember, the presence was really just there. There was something special about that place. And we've all had like pretty incredible encounters in that place, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you remember how the main topic was like about staying in the tent?
Yeah.
Like how God is calling us to stay in the tent like Joshua did. Like Moses left the tent of meeting, but Joshua stayed there, and how there is a whole generation of like who are seeking the face of God and who are staying in the tent. Yeah. Oh, I loved it. It was so beautiful.
Yes. I mean, this is our heart, is to minister to the Lord, to be in his presence. Now, before the show, you told me that you just said, I want to know what it means to minister to the Lord. I heard this desire in your heart, and it resonated with me. So could you tell us a bit more about that? Like your desire to minister, to know what it means to minister to the Lord.
Yeah, well, how I told you, it's a question of my heart, and it's not an answer. It's like something that I see. Like I know that we are called to it. We are called to like really ministering unto him, like in everything we do, and like living in the tabernacle as well as being the very dwelling place of God.
Yes.
And at the same time, we tend to use those huge words, but what does it mean? How can I apply this in my life? And I don't know. I actually really don't know. And I want to know, and I need to know. That's the thing. I really need to know, because I'm meant to minister unto him as I'm studying for my university. I'm meant to ministering unto him as I'm living at my home. And if I don't know how to do it, how can I do it, So I'm just like asking the Lord, like, what does it mean? How does it look like? And how can I position myself to do that in a natural way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the desire for a lot of people, because for so many of us, we don't know what it means to minister to the Lord, but we have a desire because it's from a place of encountering his presence. There's something deep inside of us that knows that we are made for this. We are made for his presence, to be in his presence, to minister to him and to have these interactions with him. What does it mean? And so this this sends us on a quest to find out what it means. So as we encounter his presence, we get this hunger stirred up inside of us that sends us on this quest to find out, right? So this is actually part of what we're doing as we go through the Torah, because the whole Torah is about God establishing this covenant with Israel and to give them this tabernacle, this presence, right? For his presence to be with Israel, to be amongst the people, so that they could get to know this God and to get to minister to him. So it's incredible. So I think we're going to have a great episode this week. But what we've been talking about, guys, is we've been talking about the tabernacle, the Mishkan, especially in the last episode. We talked about the structure and the furnitures inside the tabernacle. We talked about the outer court of the tabernacle. You enter into the gate and you meet this altar of offering where a sacrifice is made. And then you go to the laver, and then you go into the holy place. There's an altar of incense in the front and a golden lampstand, the menorah on the left, the table for the bread of his presence on the right. And then you go further in to the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant. His presence is in there. And we talked about how the Ark was a place of convergence between heaven and earth, between the two realms. And we talked about how the same presence, the same glory that manifested on the mount in heaven and on Mount Sinai was manifesting through the Ark. So we talked about that. But this portion, we're actually going to talk about what the priests are charged, are commanded to do and to minister to the Lord. So the portion is called Tetzaveh from Exodus 27:20 to Exodus 30:10. So so what are your thoughts, general thoughts on this portion, Shoshanna?
Well, so very, very general. I think there are two main things that we can take out of this portion. One topic that we could focus on would be like that Jesus is our high priest, and how those clothes and those garments that this high priest was meant to wear, how those represent what Jesus did for us. And the other big topic that we could focus on is that Jesus called us to be priests and to be kings and to come into his presence before him, so that we have actually this mandate of priesthood upon us and how to live that out.
Yes. So in this portion, we see priests, well, what they are commanded to do. We see how they're set apart, consecrated to minister to him. Now, we don't get the full picture of what it means to minister to the Lord, but I think, we talked about the progression of revelation around the ark, because the ark revealed his presence. But later on, King David took the same ark and put worship around it, which is the same order that's going on in heaven. So ministry to the Lord really is about telling God who he is as we behold him, because that's what the angels are doing, right? Actually, I think it was in the episode with Yoni, we talked about actually the Haftarah portion of how the angels in Isaiah 6, the seraphim, they wouldn't stop crying out day and night, saying, holy, 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 right? And it's like, because they saw God, right? And we know from Hebrews 8, and it talks about the tabernacle being a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things, as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle, the Mishkan. For he said, see that you make all things according to the pattern shown to you on the mountain. So the tabernacle is a reflection of the pattern in heaven. I think I even talked about this in the last couple of portions without even mentioning this verse, because this is what we see, right? So as we study the tabernacle, we got to keep in mind, guys, that these are the shadows of heavenly things. Just as we discussed that it's a place of convergence between heaven and earth. So we study the pattern to discover the order and the pattern of God, because he has made a pattern available to us so that we know where to find him. We can come to him, right? So we're going to talk about the priests ministering unto the Lord. Well, the first thing I see, Shoshanna, is that the first two verses of this portion, it says, you shall charge the sons of Israel that they bring you clear oil of beaten olives for the light to make the lamp burn continually day and night in the tent of meeting outside the veil, which is before the Ark of the Covenant. Aaron and his sons shall keep it in order from evening to morning before the Lord. It shall be a perpetual statute throughout the generations for the sons of Israel. So the first thing I see is that worship in heaven is perpetual, continual, and non-stop. They got to keep the light burning. They got to keep the lamp burning. And ministering to the Lord, even though we don't know the fullness of what it means at this point, is centered around God. Worship for them isn't about what they feel. It's about a charge for them to worship. What do you think?
Yes, I love that first portion, because also they show like that we need to have pure oil for the light to keep burning. I love it that it matters which kind of oil we have. We don't just use like oil that we used before, which is going to be reused. Or it's like everything about God is costly, and the way we keep this oil of intimacy and like the burning of the Holy Spirit, how we keep it going is like it matters. Like everything matters with God, and it's because of Him that it matters. How you said that worship is centered around God. It matters because of Him, because we do it unto Him and not for us. And we, how you said, it's really like a church to come and to worship and come and minister, and that's their job, that's their duty, that's what they're called to do. And it's not just their hobby to go in and like, like play 5 songs and go out again.
Right. Yeah, because in the church, like we have a lot of Christians, we worship because we enjoy it, and there's nothing bad about enjoying a few songs. But so many of us, we begin to see worship as like you said, a hobby, and we like to worship when we feel like it, when it feels convenient. But for Aaron and his sons, it wasn't about convenience. Sometimes, I would imagine it would probably be quite inconvenient because, maybe they're eating a meal or something. Oh, it's time for me to change the oil. Can I not just do that later? No, it's like, it's
no
very,
chance.
Right. So it's centered around that. But what we're seeing in the church today is that, it's about convenience. It's about our liking, worship and prayer and devotion, ministering to the Lord has become almost like a side ministry that branches off of the entire church ministry. Whereas what we see in the tabernacle is the center of it.
Yeah, like imagine coming to church for ourselves. Like I come to church so I can gain something. So even I can have good preachings that will edify me and make me come close to God. I mean, like in the end, if it's all about God, everything like the preach has to be a worship unto God. Like, and it also what you said reminded me of, again, of the prayer houses, like in the prayer house, we have like a fixed shift, like a watch that we need to go.
Yes.
And
yes.
Like, don't ask me how many times I didn't felt like praying just before my watch. Like I was like, oh, okay, another 2 hours. Okay, but I'm so tired right now, but I have my watch. I need to be on point. I need to be, punctual, and like I'm now here. I need to pray for 2 hours, at least spending time to worship God for at least 2 hours for my next watch.
Yes.
And also, like, I love night watches. Those are my favorite. But still, sometimes, when you need to wake up and you're like, I'm tired, and it's time to go to bed. But I'm like, no, I've got this watch. I've got this call to go now and to worship now and to pray now, and I can't postpone it. Like, there is no way that I could say like, oh no, I'm not coming, because I'm the one who's responsible to be there and to worship unto the Lord. And I think that's the only reason why in the time where I spent, as I was in Israel, spending time at the prayer house, why I prayed so much and I worshiped so much, it was because it was my duty. Like, I had a plan that I need to be there.
Yes.
It was not.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening and watching this week's episode. Now, if you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or follow us on Apple Podcast and Spotify and all the other platforms that you listen to this podcast on. Now, if you're enjoying this week's discussion on the Torah portion, you can listen to the full discussion on Patreon by signing up at patreon.com/TillZionSings. Now that's patreon.com/TillZionSings. Till next time, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's show. We pray you were blessed, encouraged, and strengthened. For more information on our mission, visit our website, tillzionsings.com. For daily content, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Till Zion Sings. And lastly, for exclusive bonus content and early access to episodes, become a supporting member of the show at patreon.com/TillZionSings.